Welcome back to Movieworld Recaps. Today I am going to share a thriller, drama movie about an embittered pregnant widow whose humiliated husband kills himself and embarks on a mission of vengeance against a woman and her family. Warning, spoilers ahead, so watch and enjoy. In the vibrant city of Seattle, Claire Bartle, a contented housewife, revels in her marital bliss and eagerly anticipates the arrival of her second child. However, her world is shattered during a routine checkup with her new obstetrician, Dr. Victor Mott, when she becomes a victim of sexual molestation. Distraught, she confides in her husband Michael, who encourages her to report Dr. Mott to the state medical board. Claire's brave accusation prompts 4 other women to come forward with similar experiences, and the district attorney's office prepares multiple charges against Dr. Mott. However, before he can face the consequences of his actions, Dr. Mott takes his own life to avoid arrest. As the legal proceedings unfold, Mrs. Mott, the pregnant widow of Dr. Mott, learns that her husband's assets have been frozen due to the lawsuits, his life insurance is voided because of his suicide, and she is at risk of losing her opulent home. Overwhelmed with stress, Mrs. Mott goes into premature labor, resulting in the loss of her baby and an emergency hysterectomy. While recuperating in the hospital, she comes across a news story that identifies Claire as the one who reported her husband, igniting a burning desire for revenge. 6 months later, Claire gives birth to her son, Joey, and seeks to hire a nanny to assist with childcare. Unbeknownst to her, she unwittingly employs Mrs. Mott, who is using the alias Peyton Flanders. Mrs. Mott launches a calculated campaign to undermine Claire within her own household. She secretly breastfeeds Joey, causing him to reject Claire's milk, and manipulates Claire's daughter, Emma, to keep secrets from her mother. Mrs. Mott also sabotages Michael's office proposal and fuels suspicions of infidelity between Michael and his ex-girlfriend Marlene, who is also Claire's close friend. Claire's relationship with Michael becomes strained, and Emma is turned against her mother, just as Mrs. Mott had planned. However, Solomon, an intellectually disabled handyman who is fond of Emma, discovers Mrs. Mott breastfeeding Joey, which threatens to expose her nefarious actions. To silence Solomon, Mrs. Mott insinuates to Claire that Solomon may have been molesting Emma. She further plants a pair of Emma's panties in Solomon's toolbox, leading Claire to terminate his employment. Emma, who knows the truth, tries to defend Solomon, but Claire remains skeptical, causing a rift between them. Unbeknownst to the Bartle family, Solomon keeps a vigilant eye on them, aware of Mrs. Mott's deceitful ways. With growing suspicions about Peyton's intentions, Claire becomes increasingly wary and suggests to Michael that they take a family vacation without the nanny. Little does she know that Mrs. Mott overhears their conversation through the baby monitor and sets a trap for Claire in the greenhouse. The next morning, Marlene discovers Mrs. Mott's true identity, but before she can inform Claire, Mrs. Mott cunningly lures her into the greenhouse, resulting in her death as the glass ceiling collapses on her. Mrs. Mott, aware of Claire's asthma condition, empties all of Claire's inhalers and takes Joey for a walk, leaving Claire vulnerable. When Claire returns home and discovers Marlene's lifeless body covered in blood and glass shards, she has an asthma attack and is briefly hospitalized. Michael is overwhelmed with grief and worry for both Marlene's death and Claire's health, and Mrs. Mott seizes the opportunity to make advances towards him, which he firmly rejects. Claire eventually uncovers the truth about Mrs. Mott's real identity and her sinister plans. With her health restored, Claire confronts Mrs. Mott, but the cunning nanny denies any wrongdoing and plays the victim. Michael, torn between loyalty to his wife and the seemingly innocent Mrs. Mott, is unsure of whom to believe. However, Emma finally confesses to Claire about Mrs. Mott's manipulations and how she had witnessed her breastfeeding Joey. Armed with the truth, Claire confronts Mrs. Mott once again, and this time, Mrs. Mott's facade crumbles, revealing her true malevolent nature. A tense and dramatic showdown ensues, with Mrs. Mott attempting to harm Claire and Joey. Claire fights back with all her strength, and with Solomon's timely intervention, They are able to overpower Mrs. Mott and restrain her until the authorities arrive. That's all folks for today. I hope you like it. Please subscribe to our channel for more content like this and hit on the like button to help us out.